All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here at Urban Institute. My name is Zach Boren. I'm a senior fellow here at Urban. We're working on expanding a quality registered apprenticeship system that works both for workers and for business. Happy National Apprenticeship Day. Woo! Thrilled to see, if you're online, I'm thrilled to see a packed room here in Southwest DC. It's even better than National Library Day. I tried to go to the largest library, but it was overbooked. All right, let it sink in. Let it sink in. All right, all right. Well, yeah, sorry, dad jokes. I got that one from my wife last night. It was funny. It was funny to me. All right, the event is being recorded. Just a few housekeeping notes. It's being recorded. We'll post online. Speaker bios and slides are available online. Virtual attendees, you can submit any questions you have via the Q&A form. If you're here in the room, you've got a QR code at your table. So go ahead and use that. And don't forget to do the survey at the end of the event. So, Registered Apprenticeship is having a moment. We're bringing together the leaders today that are building a stronger industry-driven registered apprenticeship system. And over the past decade, apprenticeships have nearly doubled, expanding beyond the construction trades into healthcare, into tech, into finance. And apprenticeships have grown. During President Trump's first administration, they grew by 30%. Tech giants like Google and IBM and Amazon all initiated new apprenticeship programs. And we're seeing small businesses pick them up too. We're seeing that in some of our work in building apprenticeships in North and South Carolina as an intermediary to tackle some of their challenges on retention and recruitment. And we're excited about that work going forward. Modest federal investments have really driven this growth over a decade and progress. And we've proved apprenticeships can work. States are leading, intermediaries are driving new companies to apprenticeship. We're modernizing them through investments like those at Urban that have made it really easier to start an apprenticeship than ever before. And investments like the National Occupational Frameworks, like the Standards Library, are beginning to bear fruit. So we're hopeful about the executive orders on modernizing the workforce programs, and as well as educating young people in AI skills that was recently signed by the president. They put registered apprenticeship at the center of a modern workforce system. And it's proven. They lift wages, they boost business productivity, and they drive real returns. And it's backed by research, 49% gains for workers in terms of total earnings, 144% return on investment for business. So the executive order's goal, it's bold, it's ambitious, 1 million active apprentices, but it's achievable. And success is really going to hinge on a couple of things. Whether or not we can make apprenticeships scalable, accessible, and built for emerging industries as well as the trades. And focus in on quality, something we have not done for a long time. We focused in on numbers. It's time to focus in on making sure that they're quality as well and good opportunities. Momentum is not gonna get us there. It's just not. And employers need real incentives to hire apprentices and train them. And Congress needs to step up, fund tax credits, fund grant programs that help businesses say yes to apprenticeships. And we need to get back to apprentices themselves too. So putting funding on par with college. For too long, federal and state governments have poured billions of dollars into higher ed while shortchanging what we love here in Earn and Learn. But it's time to invest in both. Time to invest in both. It's smart politics, and it's the right move for blue-collar families. And let's be clear, apprenticeships are still too rare here in the United States. We trail internationally. We trail to a number of countries and only have a fraction in comparison to Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, Canada, Australia, and the UK. But we've proven we can grow, and we can do this. It's smart, targeted investment that helped apprenticeships surge by 88%. It's not bloated spending, it's targeted investment that delivers. And we need more support to reach that 1 million apprentice goal. I'm excited about that. And we're not doing this alone. In today's event, we're powered by a group of incredible partners. Apprenticeships for America, JFF is here, AFL-CIO Working for America Institute, Brookings, CareerWise. They're not just our partners, but y'all are my friends. So I'm excited to be in this with you. And together, we're going to be committed to driving the next era of apprenticeships to expand opportunity and build on this decade of progress. It was hard-earned. Today, we're going to celebrate some leaders who made that growth real. State champions, employers, unions, intermediaries. Hey, I'm bullish on the administration's goal to get to 1 million and also modernizing the system and driving us to incorporate AI into registered apprenticeships. But executive orders aren't going to get us there by themselves. I'm going to go out on a limb here. A little bit of a limb. So I think Congress should update the National Apprenticeship Act of 1937. I mean, ensure apprenticeships can grow in the trades as well as they do in emerging industries. Our economy and workplaces, they're just fundamentally different than they were during when FDR was president and Francis Perkins, the Secretary of Labor, was a national hero. And so in doing so, Congress can make registered apprenticeships more nimble, ensuring it works for the trades as well as hospitals and classrooms where we need Americans to get back to work. But we don't know yet how this executive order is all gonna roll out. But we know this, getting to 1 million apprentices is bold, and it takes public servants to get there. The ones I was proud to serve with at the Department of Labor. They are creative, they are kind, they are committed, and they are ready to expand opportunities for all Americans. This administration made the right call by committing to registered apprenticeship. It's tested, it's proven, it's a powerful economic catalyst. It strengthens the workforce, it rebuilds the American middle class, and it rebuilds America's businesses. Registered apprenticeships simply work. They deliver good jobs, no student debt, and deliver real skills. And if we get this right, we're going to deliver what works for workers, and we'll deliver what they deserve. And this is what employers have been asking for. Now, I'm thrilled to kick off our first panel. It's lessons from leading states, so please join me in welcoming John Colburn. He's the Executive Director for Apprenticeships for America. Nicole Overlay, she's the Commissioner for Virginia Works. Erin Roth is my Assistant Secretary. I'm a Marylander, and she's with the Maryland Department of Labor. And our moderator, this is Erica Simon. She's the Deputy Director for the Partnership to Advance Youth America, or lovingly called PAYA at New America. So let's get started.
Thank you. All right, well, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you to my panelists. I'm just gonna start by saying happy National Apprenticeship Day. What a great day to be talking about apprenticeships. And I just wanna start with a quick, just each of you giving a quick introduction, who you are, where you, well, Zach just did it, but just maybe a little bit more. So maybe start at the end, Erin.
Sure. So my name's Erin Roth. I'm the Assistant Secretary at the Maryland Department of Labor, where I oversee workforce development for the state, home to registered apprenticeship. A little bit about me is I actually have worked for 3 administrations, 9 secretaries. I started as an intern and have had sort of the ultimate career path, but I had to kind of figure it out, right? And I think that's part of the excitement about registered apprenticeship, is really providing that clear pathway for people that I've been fortunate to have myself in a little bit more of a windy way, but yeah.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Overley. I am the Commissioner of Virginia Works. You may not know that Virginia Works is the Commonwealth's newly formed workforce development agency. It is about 10 months old. Went live officially on July 1 of last year. Prior to this very relatively short tenure, I guess you could say, at Virginia Works, I briefly served as Deputy Secretary for Workforce Development in the governor's office in this same administration in Virginia, and prior to that, spent a number of years in the private sector, getting deeper and deeper into workforce development, but actually started doing HR consulting. So I saw a little bit of a different vantage point on the talent landscape, but have always considered myself very much of a people-first person, and fell more and more in love with workforce development the closer I got to it. And now I have the honor of serving Virginia as it navigates its way through this new workforce agency where registered apprenticeship lives.
And I'm John Colborn. I'm Executive Director of Apprenticeships for America. I caught the apprenticeship bug about 10 years ago, just as we were all kind of rediscovering apprenticeship. And I remember sitting in Bob Lehrman's office and asking him, this seems like such a great idea. Why hasn't it scaled? And Bob said, because we haven't tried. And I think the last 10 years have been testament to a measure of trying, and our challenge going forward is going to be to try harder and really get to some of the ambitious goals that we think apprenticeship can get to, which gets me to Apprenticeships for America. AFA has set a North Star goal of growing apprenticeship 8-fold over the next 10 years. That requires something from everybody. It means that educators have to be rethinking what are the pathways that young people are on in order to find productive careers and lives. We have policymakers who have to think through our policies that support apprenticeship. We have parents who have to think through the choices, hopefully, that their children will have in selecting a post-secondary education pathway. And we have employers who need to be thinking about apprenticeship as a core talent development pathway. And so AFA is involved with all of those stakeholders and advocating for that agenda.
Great. Well, so happy to have you here for this discussion. We're going to be talking about how states are innovating and really scaling apprenticeship. And so I'm just going to launch right in, and we'll just make this kind of an open conversation. Erin, I'm going to start with you, though, and just talking about strategies for scale. So, all of yours, well, Virginia and Maryland have seen remarkable growth in apprenticeships and over the last several years. I'm kind of curious about what's driving this growth. So, Erin, I'll start with you. What are some of the effective strategies you're using or seeing, either policies or practices, in Maryland?
Sure. Well, thank you. It really is great to be here with all of you today. So I think when I think back about, kind of rewind to about 10 years ago, much like you were describing, Maryland had about 7,300 apprentices, and we have over 12,300 today. We've also significantly had more graduations than ever before. So we've gone from about 1,500 graduates a year to over 4,000. And I think that's a metric that we don't always talk about, and I really love to celebrate, because that means not only are people starting, but they're completing, and they're becoming those journey people in their professions. We have more women involved in apprenticeship. We have more people of color involved in apprenticeship, and we're really, really proud of that. But and of course, we have more people in, not just the trades, more non-traditional sectors, and we're proud of all of this. But we have lots more that we want to accomplish in the state of Maryland. And so, when I do think back to about 10 years ago, I actually think I celebrated apprenticeship about 10 years ago, maybe with the Urban Institute, which was a reflective moment for me this morning, thinking about what I might share with all of you. But at the Labor Department, we had a sleepy office of 2.5 staff, a half, right? And that half counted because we only had very little people. And so how can you grow something with that capacity, right? And so we realized that we needed more people power, not just at the Labor Department, but ambassadors across the entire ecosystem. So we really started our strategy by really just working to identify those champions across employers, industry associations, local workforce boards, community colleges, the legislature. I see my colleague, Senator Jim Rosapep, who's been a long champion as well of a registered apprenticeship. And so, I think getting the word out and helping people understand, what is apprenticeship, what is it not, all of those really core important things it's not enough, right? Like you need to do more than just exposing people to what it is. And so one thing that I'm really excited about that we just passed into law 2 weeks ago in Maryland is our signature RAISE Act, which is all focused on apprenticeship. It is a historic investment, historic policy changes. And what we tried to do when we were working in partnership with the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission, which was a legislative effort that I had the pleasure of serving on, was really think through like, what are those pain points? How can we create more apprenticeship slots? How can we get more employers on board? We've, of course, leveraged a lot of federal resources to try out different things. And so we had a good grasp of some of the things that were effective in terms of incentives, intermediaries, group programs, really just our own staffing capacity to sell and market apprenticeship in a different way. And so the RAISE Act will present an opportunity to really build on that. We anticipate about $12 million of state investment into the program, including funding our staff, which is actually has grown to about 30 people. So we have a lot of people out in the field, dedicated full-time to supporting businesses and understanding and navigating apprenticeship, concierge services that we intend to keep up. And then we'll complement those with some of these other new exciting investments.
That's great. Nicole, what's happening in Virginia in terms of strategies for scale?
So at the beginning of his tenure, Governor Youngkin set a goal of Virginia reaching 20,000 apprentices, so doubling the number of registered apprentices in Virginia by the end of his administration. We started at just about or just under 10,000. We're close to the 15,000 mark. We still have a ways to go and not a lot of time to get there. But it's interesting to me when looking back on this that that goal was set prior to the creation of this new agency. There's obviously been a huge amount of focus on workforce development more broadly across Virginia. And I actually think just in the past 6 months, some of the things Virginia Works has tried to do as we've come together into this more unified agency have really helped us move a little bit faster and move the needle on registered apprenticeship in particular. So a couple things we've done. So we also have a team of we call them registered apprenticeship consultants who are field-based. They actually previously had not been really integrated much at all into the local workforce system. So they are now co-located at our one-stop centers, at our Virginia workforce centers. I think that's really helped just raise awareness in the broader workforce system of the opportunities that registered apprenticeship presents, both for the individual and for the employer sponsor. We've been really building the relationships that we have so we have over 1,900 active sponsors right now for our pool of registered apprentices. And it's interesting because I think we talk a lot about the number of apprentices as a goal. But what I'm also trying to focus on a little bit is engagement with that pretty significant pool of employers, helping them feel part of a broader workforce development commitment that the Commonwealth is making, and also to try to use them a little bit to pull new employer sponsors into the fold. So we have really been focusing on simplifying. So it's interesting we're all, I think, trying to get the word out a little bit more in different ways. My focus has very much been, especially for new potential employer sponsors or employers in new industries, to make it simple to know where to start. And so one of the things we actually launched today is a really simple how-to video, start your apprenticeship program in 4 steps. Trying to really cut down on some of the jargon, honestly, that we use in apprenticeship and make it easy to understand how it can relate to you as an employer who maybe hasn't engaged in it as much, and also to focus on the ROI to the business. And so, the stat mentioned earlier, 144% return on investment. We've also been pulling some of the U.S. Department of Labor's data on improvements in culture, proven benefits to retention. Some of the other things that I think, from the talent landscape standpoint right now that businesses really see as benefits to them around, what apprenticeship can bring and really trying to bring some of that to the forefront. We've been starting to do more virtual events, webinars. We're running an apprenticeship expo today to connect sponsors who have open apprentices or apprenticeships with potential apprentices. So we're trying, just infusing, in addition to the kind of in-person coordination that has been the bedrock of our team for so long, trying to incorporate a lot more virtual engagement just to do some of that broader awareness building, knowing that that's the way that many find out about opportunities in today's workforce world and job market. So those are just a couple of the things we've been focused on.
That's great. Well, I'm gonna ping off of your talking about employers and ask a little bit about employer engagement. You mentioned, some of the strategies that you guys are using in Virginia. What are some other things that you're doing? And John, I'm going to actually lob this question to you, or that you're seeing, particularly as it pertains to engaging in sectors that are historically sort of underrepresented.
For sure.
Or, participation has been low. What kind of, or what examples are out there that you're seeing from your broad lens that are making a big difference for engaging employers? Because we all know that is a challenging part of this work.
That's the heart of it. And let me just say, in this work, I do not represent a state, except that I live in Maryland, so I'm very happy to do that. But Apprenticeships for America, last fall, we released a report that looked at the 50 states and what states are doing to advance apprenticeship. And let me just say, one of the things about living in a country like the United States, you have 50 states, you have 50 different stories about how apprenticeship is expanding, or in some cases, not expanding. And so in the process of doing that, we were able to unearth what we felt were some common themes for the states that were really growing. If I can just back up for a second, I just want to say, those are, and you've actually already heard a couple of them, setting a goal. When states set goals, when now a president of the United States sets goal, that tends to focus attention and promote the kind of collaboration that's necessary to pull off a complicated goal like that. Promoting new funding approaches. So, very happy to hear from the RAISE Act what that's going to mean for Maryland, and we're definitely seeing many states using funding in different ways. I'll talk about that a little more in just a second. The integration question, when states are thinking about apprenticeship not as a program, but as a tool that can be applied across state interests, whether that's in procurement or in education or in statutory hiring or economic development strategies. When you're thinking about apprenticeship as a tool rather than a program, you find lots of places to apply it. And then finally, as you mentioned, the administration matters. Being able to streamline and make more customer friendly, those points where the state is engaging with employers, that's really critical. And we've seen a number of states, Virginia included, who have really targeted that and made substantial progress. I'll also just say we have some states that have not made a lot of progress in that space, and so there's room to grow. I think, turning to the employer function, the kinds of things that we're seeing in states that really has us excited about the scaling role that states can play. Number one is embracing the marketing function. You all are doing that.
Yep.
The RAISE Act actually now creates a function within the Office of Apprenticeship to really be out there marketing. South Carolina, that in some ways kicked off this whole rediscovery of apprenticeship, got started with a marketing function. And so when states are engaged in marketing and thinking about marketing, have staff who are the representatives, the easy button to help employers adopt apprenticeship, for sure, that is really critical. And we have a saying at AFA, apprenticeships are sold, they're not bought. Nobody goes into work in the morning and Googles, how do I start an apprenticeship, and looks at the 5 steps and says, oh, that's what I'm going to do. If someone actually did do that, they would look at the steps and they'd say, I'm going to clean out the supplies closet instead, because that's something I can actually get done. And so having this marketing function and having support functions for employers to take up apprenticeship is really critical. Second is that tax credit question, or other kinds of incentives for states to be able to provide employers who are doing apprenticeship. And we're seeing across states a variety of different kinds of experimentations with tax credits and other kinds of grants or rewards that are helping, that are making it easier for our employers to say yes to apprenticeship.
Any other thoughts from you guys on your incentives or strategies in engaging employers? Nicole?
So we did just recently run with some of our apprenticeship expansion funding from the SAFE grants from the U.S. Department of Labor. We really tried to maximize the opportunity that gave us to run some employer incentive efforts, and we were blown away, honestly. And just really in the past 3 months, we ran a pretty short little campaign and built some kind of marketing around it, around the benefits to employers. of registered apprenticeship and called it the Hired Apprenticeship Fund, Virginia's first ever Hired Apprenticeship Fund, targeted towards a set of industries in particular that we had, that the grant and we wanted to grow, and really focused it most of all on net new apprenticeship programs. So the funding was available. There was some funding available for just existing programs who were adding net new apprentices, but what we were really looking to do was to access and support net new programs within the Commonwealth, and we had over double the number of applications for slots that we were able to take. And so it did show us a great deal of interest. In fact, one of the things we're trying to do now is to figure out if there are other ways that we can access and use some additional funding to support more of them. That was a relatively small, I think, incentive, $4,000 per employer per apprentice. And we were just really blown away because we hadn't really done something like that before, at least in recent memory. We were really surprised and delighted by the amount of interest. And I think it just does speak to, a combination of things, right? Part of it was the fact that we made it a campaign of sorts. We put it out there. We said, here's the benefit. Here's what we're hoping to achieve. We will step beside you every step of the way if you are going to use this money to start a net new program. And so you can feel comfortable in that. It wasn't just giving the funds, but the funds obviously were a big part. The incentive itself was a big part of it too. So I was really excited about that recently.
Awesome. In Maryland, we have what sounds pretty similar, actually. We had a pay-per-apprentice concept. We've put about $4 million of federal funds in over the past couple of years, and it is amazing not only the uptake and the way that you can move the needle with an investment of that kind, of just a relatively small dollar amount per apprentice for those startup costs, but also it opens the door for a conversation to have a tool to talk about. But John, I think one of the things I really liked about the comments that you were making were thinking about apprenticeship as a tool versus a program. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like to share a little bit about too, is that now that we do have a deeper bench of people that can really go out and sell apprenticeship and help employers understand, like, one, we have to do our homework before we go and sell the tool, right? We can't just apply the same spiel to every employer. Like, so we've actually done this, what I think is pretty cool. Our chief economist, who's on our team, and his group of labor market information professionals teamed up with our apprenticeship experts to really dig into the data of our state and like where are those big win opportunities to create group programs, to invest in intermediaries, and to either expand dramatically in something like the trades where there's a lot of familiarity with the model, but still room to grow. But then, like, how do you break in to a brand new sector that really does need that 101 and is probably going to need a lot of more hand-holding, a lot more selling, a lot more conversations to seal the deal. And so we're really taking a data-oriented approach to thinking about our sales strategy and helping our team really dig into like their local community needs, but also connecting with each other, because we are not looking to create 500 different healthcare apprenticeship programs. We want to make sure that we're connecting those dots, but we know geographically, like having people embedded within communities, building those relationships within their community that they know best, is the relationship piece of that we find to be really valuable. So I think in addition to some of the the tools, and then we'll be able to expand them with the RAISE Act coming in terms of operationalizing that, at least. I think just applying that data-driven approach and recognizing like one size fits all isn't really going to seal the deal is important.
Absolutely. I think we've all figured out that one size fits all is not the approach that works the best. So. Thinking about your, using data and you're using it to, understand your market and understand what your employers are needing. Are you using data to think about how you're targeting apprentices or targeting occupations or targeting sectors? Are there particular industries in both your states or that you're seeing, John, just sort of more broadly that are part of your strategy or where you're seeing your state want to go?
Yep.
I'll mention one of the things in the past month and literally in the past 4 weeks that we have done in response to an ongoing desire from our apprenticeship council and more broadly, I think, across Virginia to really understand the landscape of active apprenticeships is to build a dashboard that is going through its final level of review now, and then it will become public, to be able to get a better picture of change over time and current real-time view of, geographically where are our active apprenticeships, by industry where are active apprenticeships. We've had in the past, we obviously have been able to pull and have tracked industry data in terms of where our apprenticeships are most active, but I think that this dashboard approach, like everything is getting dashboarded these days, but it's really helpful to give us a better real-time view, and to give policymakers and decision makers, perspective on growth opportunities. You mentioned you had a significant increase in women in apprenticeships. That's one of the things that we're going to start looking at, right? So we're just trying to pull all these different ways of kind of looking at our current landscape of apprentices, and to make some better, maybe more targeted decisions, and excited for that to go live in a couple days.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So a couple things come to my mind on this one. One, I would say, we're talking a lot about the private sector, but we're really looking inward at like, what can we do? Like, we want to walk the walk that we're talking all the time. And so we have been working with our sister agencies. We stood up a public sector apprenticeship innovation fund with some federal resources. And we've had a lot of conversations and a lot of interest. We are finding, though, like we're learning a lot through that process, right? So like, while we haven't spent the dollars that we would have anticipated at this moment, it's opened the door to so many conversations and helping us to understand, like, what are the things, we have our own jargon in the public sector, like PINs and reclassifications, and how can we make it easier to navigate our own systems? And so we've done a lot of work with our Department of Budget and Management and sister agencies to just educate them. We're looking inward within our own agency. And in fact, actually, we're going to be briefing the governor's economic competitiveness cabinet next week on registered apprenticeship, because we believe it is a key component of our economic growth strategy in the state. So I think that's really exciting. And as we look across, we just recently launched, for example, the first procurement officer apprenticeship program, I think, in the country. That's one of the things we'll talk next week with our sister agencies about. You all have procurement people that you're hiring. We also are working with the AICPA on their accountant program. Like, you all have fiscal positions. HR is on my mind if anybody has some great ideas there. But I think
has apprenticeships.
Okay,
so
but those are the types of things I think we're trying to think strategically on the sector side, looking within, like, where are those occupations that everybody has and how an intermediary or group program could help. In terms of job seekers and the workers and helping them advance, I think one other thing that we're doing is we actually teamed up with our Department of Transportation colleagues, and they have invested a historic $24 million into workforce development. And so we just finished up the first round of grant making. Actually, we're going to announce the winners in the next couple of weeks here, so they don't yet know, but we decided we were working with transportation, like, clearly infrastructure is the topic, but how can we build out more pathways so that more people can access these good opportunities that already exist in the trades? Like, what are getting in the way, and how can we create more new apprenticeship opportunities? And so we actually limited the service delivery model. It wasn't really intended to be, like, that nobody said, like, it must be an apprenticeship thing, but we felt like, let's limit the service delivery model to some of these best practices and pathways into the apprenticeship pathway. So registered apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, and then adult education, integrated education and training, if you're familiar. Those are the three service delivery models, but the idea is to build out these pathways to registered apprenticeship combined with extensive support services, childcare, transportation, case management. And I can think back to like 2 years ago where I was talking to a really effective, great union shop partner for apprenticeship, and they're like, well, our apprentices are employees, like, we don't do that case management thing, and I don't think they need those support services. We're like, well, I don't know. It's been exciting to see how they've evolved as well, and seeing that can present some really important opportunities to building their pipeline as well.
Yeah, and actually unions have a long history of actually providing kind of case management. Maybe we need to call it something different for that crowd, but they're definitely in that. One thing I'll say is that when we looked across the states, we saw states could definitely move the needle on these population impacts. And in particular around youth, we really saw some states significantly change the mix of their apprentices when they focus on youth. And we have a handful of states in this country that have really focused. Indiana, I don't know if we have anyone from Indiana here. Indiana is really focusing on youth apprenticeship, and see that as a big part of the growth trajectory for apprenticeship. And same thing for gender. We've seen a number of states who are significantly moving the needle in terms of women's participation in apprenticeship. A lot of that, frankly, though, is tied to occupational mix. And if apprenticeship is just going to be in one industry, you're going to have some very natural limits on population and interest in those kinds of roles. When you can expand it and make that occupational mix a little bit more diversified, then you have a lot more opportunity to engage other kinds of populations, and that just seems critical to me. And then the last thing I'll just say is, Erin, I just want to put a thumb on the work that you're doing for internal hiring in the state, because if you look on any city, town, county, who are the top employers, it's going to be the state, the city, the county. It's going to be a public sector employer generally, or among the largest, and we need to be able to internalize the value of apprenticeships for the public sector as part of our own, as part of our ability to then be able to sell it to the private sector.
Yeah, and public employers have so many occupations and sectors within, and there's sort of mini cities that you're running, so they're a great place to raise apprenticeships up. Just talking about partners and the systems that apprenticeship and we all work in, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the systems. And for a long time, apprenticeships have existed sort of separate from the formal education system, and separate from what most people think of as the workforce system, workforce training programs. But that seems to be changing. I think it seems to be changing in your states. What role do colleges, workforce boards, unions, other organizations play in your attempts to scale and scaling strategies?
You want to start?
Sure. So I would say, one, I think you make a really great point. Like, workforce development is economic development, but then also K through 12, higher ed, like those should be considered workforce development. It's a lot of investment and resources that we can bring to the table when we all work together differently and think of it as one ecosystem versus these disparate systems. And so I think we've been at that. We have, of course, on the K through 12 side in Maryland, we have a big transformational blueprint for education push where we're really working to create these registered apprenticeship opportunities starting in high school. Then on the higher education side, we've done a lot with our partners at the Maryland Higher Education Commission and our 16 community colleges, specifically to say, like, here are the different ways that you can intersect with apprenticeship. And there are different, you could be a sponsor, you could be a classroom instruction provider, you could give credit. And I think, I actually think back to about 10 years ago when people frequently would say, like, it could be, it doesn't have to be college or apprenticeship anymore. It can be both, and you can use the apprenticeship model to build out a pathway that results in a degree. And so we're working with our community college partners to do just that, and our employer partners as well. So 10 of the 16 schools in our community college system are actually sponsors already, but I believe that they're all plugged in various ways, and we're really excited to kind of keep building on that.
I would say the same in Virginia, much of the same, discussion around community colleges as core partners, the K-12 system as a core partner. I mentioned that we have embedded our registered apprenticeship consultants into the local workforce system. I think that's been hugely helpful. We've been trying to really explore and determine, ways to co-enroll apprentices with other workforce programs, funding and supportive services that can be provided to them. And so, all of that is really, those are core aspects of what we're doing. I would say we're also trying to work with not only unions, but also industry associations, particularly those who maybe, show some interest in helping to encourage apprenticeship in more emerging industries. And so we have not yet run one of these, but we've built a concept. We're going to do so in a couple of weeks. We've built a concept that we're calling an apprenticeship accelerator. I know there's lots of different AA terms or apprenticeship accelerator alliances, all those things. When this particular workshop concept that we have, we're going to actually test run with a couple of industry associations that are going to bring together a number of their HR representatives together, and we're going to do some co-creation of works processes in the room for a couple of different apprenticeable occupations, and actually kind of build out programs together with registered apprenticeship consultants in the room to help them, and make it almost a little bit of like a lab, customer experience design type of concept. And that, I think, hopefully is a really helpful way. We've seen a lot of interest in it so far, a helpful way of engaging with some of our industry associations that are hoping to do some expansion of registered apprenticeship in Virginia. And alongside that, we're also trying, I think, so on the topic of public sector apprentices too, we have one champion on our team for state agency apprentices. We're trying to build out some other kind of parallel industry pillars almost, but in doing so, we're not limiting that just to registered apprenticeship consultants. We're actually trying to build across the Virginia Works team and our partners some kind of communities of practice that are industry focused, so that we're actually trying to create little hubs within our agency of workforce development practitioners who have come from different industries and know that industry and can share experience with the registered apprenticeship team, with those who are working in other aspects, not even just employers, but doing our career coaching and resume review to help people get to know different industries and stuff like that. So just trying to think through some of those ways of maybe even bridging gaps from a partnership standpoint, both within our many programs and teams within this new agency and outwardly, and trying to align that as best we can to industry and to employers in general.
And all good points. We certainly, big thumbs up on community colleges. We think they're going to be central to the growth of apprenticeship. And the only thing I would add is that we're seeing in a number of states a real embrace of this idea of apprenticeship intermediary organizations, some of what you're doing with the business associations, where you've got a set of organizations out there who can do the business calling, who can provide the sort of the support services for employers, and put together a package solution that doesn't require a lot. In particular, I'll just shout out Colorado for their work on registered apprenticeship intermediaries and their work to build a whole network there. But across the country, we're seeing states really look outside of the apprenticeship office for a set of partners to help with this work.
That's great. Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to ask one more question. We're in a unique place watching what's happening with our federal government, but thinking about policy, thinking about growing your apprenticeships programs at the state level, what federal investments or policies have been impactful in your states? And looking to the future, what are the specific policy changes you'd like to see? I love that. Anybody take this one?
I'll lead off. I think first off, the state apprenticeship expansion grants have been absolutely critical.
Yep.
They built the infrastructure around states' capacity. They have sometimes with the competitive portion of those grants, provide some focus on particular issues to help the system start to address those kinds of challenges. So I think that's got to continue. We're going to need to have that level of support for the states going forward. But really for Apprenticeships for America, we think that the signature policy that is necessary to drive scale for apprenticeship is something we call pay for apprenticeship. We're seeing experimentation with that in individual states. That's a great place to start. But the advantage of having a federal program that would support that is that we know states' budgets go up and down, and there's business cycles. And in order for pay for apprenticeship, the idea that if you place somebody in apprenticeship, you're a sponsor, you're an employer, there's a check that goes along with that once that person's stabilized in that role. And if you can count on that, you can plan with it, you can create an industry of folks who are providing services under that approach. So we really feel like the federal government has a role in creating that. Yep, sorry.
No, we've just got 1 minute, but we're going to have time for questions from the audience and those that are online. So, feel free to, how are you guys seeing federal policy, activate in your states? What are you thinking about?
I would second the value of the expansion funding and what we've been able to do with that. I think both from a capacity building standpoint, but also to your point, just kind of raising awareness more broadly of the opportunity. We've used some of that for teacher apprenticeship programs in partnership with our Department of Education. So it's actually, it's given us a vehicle to do some more collaborative work too, and obviously to put forth the set of employer incentives that we're doing now. So, I would say that, and second what you said.
Plus one, and I think I would just double down on like the stability that those federal investments can and should hopefully provide. We're putting skin in the game in Maryland. We see that that is an important piece, and that we need to diversify our funding streams. But without that like stable investment, it's harder to plan and to plan like to attack it and really go big.
Yeah, sort of the stability is key for sure. So we're gonna do a few audience questions, and thanks to the team at Urban for queuing these up for us. This question is, what suggestions and/or resources do you have for funding new or growing apprenticeship programs in a state? And any advice for starting an apprenticeship program in a career field that does not have a SOC code? It's free for all here. Any advice? My state folks, Aaron?
Yeah, like when you mentioned SOC codes, mine goes to cybersecurity, which is one of our what we're calling our lighthouse sectors in Maryland, where we're really working across the entire state to really lean in and where we think we have a competitive advantage and opportunity. And we have some cybersecurity apprenticeship programs in the state. They're doing good work, but we spend a lot of time wondering like, how can we scale? And we see it as a solution for employers, but do they see it as a solution? If they don't see it as a solution, like it's not going to happen. And so we're having some of these kinds of conversations, and I think it goes back to some of my earlier points of like, it is going to take a little bit of time to break into some of these industries that are newer. And when you think about some of the data comments I made, like we've spent a lot of time on SOC-related codes for cybersecurity to really understand like what is the ecosystem, what are the projections, and then how do we go about scaling, and like what are the right occupations to end in, I think is another important point too, because you want to create a pathway up. I mean, that's one of the positive things about apprenticeship is upward mobility. And so we're trying to like work through that. I think, some of the investments we've talked about, pay per apprentice, certainly intermediaries, we're state of small businesses in Maryland is another important point. So we sometimes like have employers feel like, oh no, that's going to be too much, that's too burdensome, or with that ratio, there's all these different pieces of it. But I think when you take it on whole and you work with the business to help them see that it's not, it's not insurmountable, and that it's not charity either, that there's a business case, I think that's where you should really lean in.
Yeah. Okay, so following up on the ROI that you talked about earlier, how are states evaluating ROI and benefits to employers? And the question is, full randomized control trials, employer surveys, looking at National Directory of New Hires? I think I know the answers, but I'm going to let you speak to them.
Go first, Nicole.
I wish we were as far along as a randomized control trial. We do some surveying, and we get a lot of both quantitative and qualitative feedback, generally speaking, kind of on an ongoing basis. That's actually one of the areas that I really want to amplify over the coming months and years as this agency gets a little more established in how we're handling some of our, and rethinking, honestly, some of our registered apprenticeship, just kind of standard procedures. I think we actually have the opportunity to intake and utilize a lot more employer feedback in helpful ways and feed that back into the workforce ecosystem. I would really like to know, honestly, the employer or sponsor version of a net promoter score. I think we use that in a lot of other contexts. I don't think we use it all that much in the world of apprenticeship. Would you recommend this program to another person, another employer, another business, another industry partner? That's kind of the question at the end of the day that I'm really curious about. And actually, I would say I'm curious about it for every single workforce program, because I want ultimately, I want employers to want to tell their peers to get engaged and in these same types of programs. So we have a ways to go there, but I do have a vision a little bit around that, and I think it would be really helpful collectively if there's more national data sets around similar types of things, and probably it's a way for states to work together to gather some of that too.
Yeah.
In Maryland, we have a longitudinal data system, and so we have been partnered with them. There's way more, by the way, that we'd like to do as well, Nicole. But I think one thing that we have done that's exciting is we've transferred all of our apprenticeship data over to this longitudinal data system that collects information from higher education, K through 12, just tons of information, so that we can better understand, like, how do people do over time, and build that case for of why it's effective, right? And so we are using pretty old data at this point, like 2012 data, I believe. But even back then, 5 years after somebody went through an apprenticeship program in the state of Maryland, people were earning well over $80,000 a year. And so that's old data, so I'd like to update it, right, with our partners. But I think it's those types of pieces of information that will help us, when we're talking about the K through 12 setting, and why educators and parents should want their young person to go through a program. Like, those are the talking points I think we need more of. We have some good ones, but I think we need way more evidence to really drive that.
And I'll just add briefly that at Apprenticeships for America, one of the things we're looking at is the sort of data ecosystem around apprenticeship. I would say, rather than invest in some large study, let's get our data systems a little bit organized first. And so I think there's a bit of work to be done there. Definitely +1 on the Net Promoter Score idea. I think that's a great idea. We need to be looking, more broadly across. If you think about it, we have a national student clearinghouse for higher education. We have a way of being able to track how students are doing, what kind of results they're getting, how individual institutions are performing. We probably need a similar kind of structure as apprenticeships are if they're going to scale. And so what that looks like and how we do that, don't pretend to have the answers, but we'll be issuing at least some recommendations on that coming up in the later part of this year.
Awesome. So I'm gonna skip down a little bit and selfishly ask, what role do you see youth apprenticeships playing both in Maryland and Virginia, and then John, of course, across the broader work that you're seeing?
Yeah, so we're actually in a very transformational state of youth apprenticeship in Maryland. I think we have frequently called it like the minor leagues of apprenticeship, where it hasn't been equal to registered apprenticeship in many ways, but it's presenting the same types of mentorship, paid work experience, what you're learning in the classroom is complemented by what you're learning on the job. Like the core elements of apprenticeship are there with our youth apprenticeship system. All 24 jurisdictions in Maryland are participating at this point. We have over 1,000 youth apprentices. It's very, very exciting. But we're really thinking hard about, like, how can we take it to the next level? How can we convert those youth apprentice employers to do registered apprenticeship starting in high school, right? And so we do have that happening already, but we want way, way more. And so I think that's where my mind goes with that question.
Similar for us, it's a big area of growth. It's been one of the things that I think we've identified as a real untapped opportunity in Virginia to grow, and I think that's similar to other states too. We're probably not as far along in how we do it as we are with the focus that we've had on registered apprenticeship. But I think over the course of the next year, especially when we think about kind of broader work-based learning as we partner with K-12, it is one of our biggest focal areas for sure.
And I'll just add briefly, I mean, I think the K-12 system is a vastly under-leveraged resource in thinking about apprenticeship. If we're going to achieve the kind of goal that AFA has set forward, we know we're going to need youth apprenticeships. And we also know in the United States that the apprenticeship average age is much higher than in other countries, which really suggests we have room for growth among youth apprenticeships. I think there's a couple things sort of at play here. One is this is varsity level work, because we just took on a very complicated organizational partner, the K-12s, and so with complexity around scheduling and liability issues, a whole variety of different things that make this harder. But the results could be potentially huge, and so we're certainly very excited to see how this plays out, and we'll be working with partners at CareerWise and other places to help advance the youth apprenticeship objective.
And PAYA. Don't forget
And PAYA, of course, PAYA. Goes without saying.
Well, we are at time, and I would just love to ask the audience to help me thank our panelists for joining us today. A really great conversation. about scaling apprenticeships. So conscious of staying on time, so I'm going to introduce our next session, which is going to be expanding with evidence. Am I? Yes? Okay, I think we're good. And that is Vince Kohler from JFF and Annalise Groger from Brookings and our own youth apprentice from New America, Megan Godoy. So.
Are we on? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's great to be here on National Apprenticeship Day. But then again, I'm Vince Kohler with Jobs for the Future, where every day is National Apprenticeship Day. So I know, I had to land it. It's really great to be here. We heard in the green room a little bit what's been talked about before. We're going to talk about evidence, and we're going to talk about it in sort of a 4x4 format. 4 questions, 4 I'm going to try to answer or raise, 4 that Annalise Goger with Brookings is going to try to answer, and then 4 for our apprentice, the part that we're most excited about, Megan Godoy, who's here, is going to answer about what it's like to be an apprentice. We have 4 questions for you, or questions that you can ask us. So we're going to break the 4th wall and make this a dialogue as best as we can. This is obviously a special day. We just had a session on the National Apprenticeship Fund, which JFF and Google launched. 1,000 people on that call. There's this one. Sorry, we didn't schedule it very well. These are in competition with one another. Someday we'll get it right, and maybe we shouldn't do this all in a single day. That's probably fair to say. Maybe we should go back to a week. I do want to say one thing about evidence that's sort of implied, but sometimes needs to be expressed. The sponsoring organizations that put this on, and a big thank you to Urban for actually doing the hard work of hosting it. We've been talking to each other a bit. And we think the evidence is in the room in some ways. This is about field building, right? If we want to get to scale, we have to have everyone who's here, who I can barely see, and everyone who's on the line, and those people who watch it late at night, kind of between, I don't know, C-SPAN, to all work together. And that's the field building part. And one thing that's very cool with the partnership that has been built by the organizations, we all really, really live and breathe this stuff, love it, and love to collaborate. And so I think there's a lot to be done. We have some answers, but we have mostly questions, especially when it goes to scaling. So I just want to mention that as part of the evidence that's worth talking about. I have some slides. Let's see if it works. So 4x4 questions about scaling. I'll start with one. This is one that comes from our friends in Cemex. I want to sort of emphasize that I'm going to talk about, why does it make sense? Again, we're covering some territory that you all know, but sometimes it's worth reminding ourselves the larger trends, the long-term trends. This is a 70-year trend about how you get jobs with minimal education. In the 50s, 90%, 80% to 90% people could get their job with a minimal education. Today, fewer than 10%. And the inverse of that that's interesting is that having what's sometimes referred to as soft skills, durable skills, employability skills are on the rise. The demand for those are on the rise before hire. How do you obtain those? That's what we're going to get into. How do you obtain those prior to being hired? Well, that's part of why this model is so strong. The experience curve is up, so employers expect experience. How do you get experience when you haven't had the job? Post-secondary education, again, this is sort of logically the inverse of of getting there with minimal education. So that's one piece of evidence. The other piece of evidence, thanks to our friends, again, Semets and CareerWise Colorado, where are skills best learned? This is what employers believe. Employers believe skills are best learned in the workplace, except for a few. So advanced math, yeah, they do think school is a good place to learn it. It's not as important as you think. So the higher the skill here on this chart, the more important it is. So advanced math, not so important, although that obviously depends on the job. Communication, very important. And yes, schools play a role. Everything else, employers think it's the workplace that gets it to you, that gives it to you, that introduces you to it. And if that's true, then we have to get people, young people, any people really, but especially young people, out in the workplace. Does that ring true for all of us? I would agree with that. You know, I could read, I could write, but could I really use the skills before I really hit the job market, right? That's the question. Another piece of evidence, does it benefit apprentices? Seems obvious, seems so logical. Of course it does. The curve is upward. This was compiled by Apt Associates based on AAI data, so that's the American Apprenticeship Initiative. All the curves go up in a very direct way. Annalise will talk more about the ROI, so I'm not going to get into that. So we're going to skip any kind of ROI questions because we've got the expert over here. And then there's one other piece of evidence that I'm going to show you a chart of, and that is the shortage, the talent shortage. So sometimes the question arises, well, you know, you can train people in all sorts of different ways. We have a talent shortage. It's acute in some industries, in some places. And this here just shows how many unemployed people are per job opening. And you can see this decline from the 2010 onward to below 1. And obviously below 1 is a problem if you have more openings than talent. There's the COVID bump. And, you know, while we can't extrapolate into the future, we don't exactly know where we're headed, but the talent shortage is real. And if we're talking about onshoring jobs or building new industries or bringing industries home, without having a solution for that talent shortage, we're not going to get there, right? So again, another piece of evidence. Now, oh, sorry, I went one too far. I'm going to try to back up. So then the question is, and now I'm going to get away from charts because we're going to get into a little bit of speculation. So the piece of evidence that I want to briefly raise is this evidence on how to get to scale. And that we really don't have very much of. I read recently a report about how they found evidence of life or potentially evidence of life in an extra planet that's outside of our solar system through kind of light refraction. I thought this is amazing. First of all, that can be done, right? So Webb telescope, you look out, you see its star, by the light, you can say, oh, there's probably life here. And I thought we're doing some of the same thing in apprenticeship right now. It's like we have to infer, we have to look at evidence from other solar systems, which is usually other countries. We have to infer, extrapolate, look at the reflection of things, and then assume what could happen. And I want to just give you a couple of examples of a couple of numbers that are meaningful. One number is 1 million. You might have heard that the president put out an executive order, may have been talked about in the last panel, I don't know, last week, saying we got to get to 1 million. So that's an interesting number, 1 million. Seems like a lot, but you know, is it a lot? Is it the right number? It's a good question. We did some extrapolating of our own using Joe Fuller's data on in a report that's very worth reading, Room to Grow. A few years old, but very, very riveting still, if you like that sort of thing especially. And it talks about the apprenticeability of jobs and how do you know which jobs are truly suitable for apprenticeships. And you know, we sometimes talk about those as middle skills jobs, but honestly, if you're a CNC operator, and you go to a dinner party, I don't think you would describe yourself as middle skill. I think you'd probably talk about the complexity and the sophistication. So I think our advanced manufacturing tech jobs are not middle skill. They are very advanced in skill, and they can be had without a PhD for sure. And so, so the question then is, when you look at what Joe Fuller's computations are, or analysis of what jobs are apprenticeable, we looked at that. I did some number crunching in California. We came up with 625,000 apprenticeships that we should have there to meet the need, both the need on the supply side and the need on the need on the supply on the demand side. And if you extrapolate that to the country, we're at 6 million, 4.2 million. Sorry, 4.2 million. Now, is that way off chart? If you look at that and compare it to, again, other solar systems like Germany, you find that's right in there. That is right in there. And if you look at our graduating class, next month, about 4 million seniors are going to graduate. If you had 50% of those in an apprenticeship program, that would give you 3.8 million over, again, per year, some junior, some senior. You get to your 6 million or 4 million, wherever you want to fall, real fast. Does that seem, or do these numbers seem outlandish? Do we get there overnight? I don't think so. Could we and should we get there? And do we have evidence that other things can grow that fast? I looked at some other numbers. I looked up, well, what is your guess? How many people were working on AI in 2005? Let's pick 20 years ago, 2005. What's your guess? How many people worked dedicated job in AI?
14.
3,700, 14? Wow. 1 million, believe it or not. How do I know? I asked AI. Now, AI may be inflating its own numbers, but still, 1 million. But how many people today? What do you guess? In the US, this is US. 17 million, okay? 1 to 17. Over 20 years. It's a little skewed when you look at over the years how it developed, but still, we can do things if there's a demand, if there's a will, if there's a market. So our mission really is about building that market, removing all the obstacles. You've heard in the last panel, I think, that was a discussion. How do we remove the obstacles to have that growth possible? If the talent demand is there, again, by inference, we have to sort of speculate what is the right number. It is higher than you think. It is higher than you think in terms of both the need for it and the potential to actually make it happen. What does it cost? We sometimes think about how much does this cost? We're already spending the money, actually. We're just spending it in different ways. I'll give you one other number, and then I'll stop, of evidence, again, extrapolated evidence of some things that we need to change. I did a lit review recently, and I found out that there were 1,000 papers on CTE education for every single paper on apprenticeship. Bob Lerman, you'd probably, when you did your lit review, it was probably worse than that even. So I think we really have to change the evidence picture there too. We have to do more to not exclude that as a path. And again, this is sort of a lagging indicator, because if we had 4 million apprentices, we probably would have more papers. But we also need to generate the evidence in part. So I'm going to stop there because I'm really excited about sharing, other evidence. So I'm going to turn it over to Annalise.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, you get the there you go.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Annalise. I'm a fellow at Brookings. And I'm excited to talk about the evidence for employers' willingness to train apprentices, because the title of the event today is Industry Driven, Made to Scale. If it's industry driven, then there has to be a value proposition for businesses to engage, for employers to engage. And unfortunately, we have a pretty limited body of evidence around what is the value proposition for the U.S., mostly from the Urban Institute team, but also a few other key pieces. If you're interested, I have a handout with some literature, some of the key literature out on the table outside, including some of the folks, some of the evidence where the American Apprenticeship Initiative found that in the US there was $1.44 for every dollar invested by the employers. But one of the challenges of assessing the return on investment for business is, in the US, is one, the variation in approaches to apprenticeships. So are you comparing apples to apples? Are you comparing a 6-month youth apprenticeship to a 4-year adult apprenticeship? Does that make sense? Like how do you think about the duration, all the variables that could be different by sector, different by occupation? And so we have to think about all those complexities in the US, considering that we don't have national standards for occupations. And so there are a lot of elements that make it tricky. The other point that I want to make before jumping into some of the other slides and questions is just that we want to move to a place as a field, as a coalition, where we have a shared metric for calculating ROI, where it's not just researchers at Urban that generate the numbers, but that firms are using the same data, the same general formulas, and thinking about this in a streamlined, consistent way. And that's how they do it in Switzerland. So basically there's by sector every 3 years, they calculate the average ROI, and then the industry associations for each occupation can say, you know, our ROI for, you know, electric battery installers, whatever, is too low. We need to make some changes to our program to get the ROI higher. And if it's too high, then you might not have a value proposition for the apprentice, who might be staying a little longer than they need to, and they could go out and convert to a full-on employee. So it's partly, we need to start working as a field towards having these kinds of metrics so you can be able to say, on average, this is what it is in our sector. So one thing I'm excited to announce today is that I'll be starting a project looking at an exploratory level on ROI, really trying to get input from all the folks in the field who've already started to measure it and think about this question. So I really wanted to invite your input on this study, and I might be reaching out to you if you've been doing this, and to really start to think about what is the kind of framework that we could use, what are these decision points that we want to make around the metric, and what are the trade-offs when we make a decision about, you know, whether to stop at the end of the program or look 5 years out, et cetera. So with that, the first question I have is, well, what goes into the return on investment question? And drawing on the literature here, the biggest costs that employers calculate are the wages, right? So which ideally in an apprenticeship, it would progress over time as the person learns. The other costs include things like the on-the-job training curricula needs to be built, the mentor's time, you know, in the workplace, and then any kind of equipment that needs to go into it. There are other costs here. This is not all the costs, but these are some of the key ones. Another, on the savings side or on the benefit side, many employers do it because it lowers their hiring costs, right? So they have a bunch of apprentices. They can see in action which ones are the most suitable for that role. And after the apprenticeship is over, they can decide, like, this is the person that I want to advance, rather than paying a professional wage and then realizing that it's a failed hire and then having to start over, which is very costly. You also have seen a lot of indirect benefits, like lower turnover, less overtime, and then the direct benefit being someone's trying to get in the door. The direct benefit being increased productivity over time. So just like any job, as you're in the beginning, you might have a cost of bringing that person on, but then after a few months, that person really starts to, you know, even though they're still being paid an apprentice wage, they're producing a lot more. And then another benefit we often hear from employers is that the staff who were there, who were supervising folks, see it as a managerial professional development opportunity. They're starting to learn how to cultivate a team and how to manage on their job. And they can feel that it's a sense of a satisfaction from cultivating someone and seeing all this talent and seeing new ideas coming into their organization. There's lots of other benefits, but these are kind of some of the typical things that we see going into that. The second question I have is, well, if you're the business and you're thinking about improving your ROI in apprenticeship, what should you what factors should you be considering? So based on Stefan Volter, his research and basically some of the key factors here are, how is the training designed? So what is the duration, and what amount of time is spent in the workplace versus in the classroom? Those kind of factors can shape the ROI. Market conditions can shape the ROI. If there's a lot of competition for people, then it may be harder to get that ROI than if there's less competitiveness. Or if you have a monopoly over a product, you might have more incentive to just do very specialized and less general training. And other factors like the pay structure and regulatory structures, right? Like, so you might think about Germany, there's a lot more rigid hiring and firing rules and policies. That affects like when and how a firm gets the ROI, whereas in the US or Switzerland, where it's a more liberalized market, it has a different effect. And then finally, the individual apprentice could have, more productivity, less productivity, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into the selection of the right person for that apprenticeship role. And are they coming in at the level that's appropriate for what your program will do? If you want someone who's a little bit more advanced to move them up, then you might have a different program than somebody who's very basic. And then this is a graph taken from Bob Lerman's piece, but he's also building on some previous research here that just kind of lays out, what I see a lot in the field is when people say, well, I want to do an apprenticeship, but I just want it to be 6 months. Because if I do more, then it's going to be too high of a cost. But actually, for ROI, the longer the apprenticeship is, the stronger your ROI is going to be, because there's this initial period, and as you see that straight line is the apprentice wage. Obviously, it goes up over time as you start to build your competency. The curving line is your productivity. So in the first phase there, the lighter blue zone, that's when it's a cost to have that apprentice. But then once you hit a pivot point there in the middle where it starts to become a gain. And so the right duration, it could vary by occupation or by firm, but you want to strike a balance between the employer recoups an investment, ideally before the end of the program, but you don't want to have it too short, because then it's mostly like an internship. You spend all their time training them and then they leave. So this is really another way to think about the design and how the ROI figures in. And then my last point, because I know we want to pass it on, everyone wants to hear from the apprentice, is if we're going to be thinking about a shared metric, the more that you engage, like a lot of the ROI will depend on what is the ecosystem around that firm that is playing different roles that could ease the costs on the employer. So if you have a training provider that's working with multi-employer groups to do that first year of foundational training across multiple employers, that means that you don't have to develop a customized training program in-house to do that work. And so if you have these partners to lean on in that process, if you have a government that's working with you to set quality standards and make sure that certain things are enforced, and that the meaning of that apprenticeship qualification is validated and formalized, then that helps. So the ecosystem is really important for making sure that ROI is, without partnerships, it's going to be hard to get a consistently positive ROI for a lot of occupations. And now I should probably go back. I don't know. She doesn't have slides.
Right,
but
maybe one back.
But I want to introduce Megan, who's our apprentice today, to talk about what the value, because it's important to have an industry buy-in to have apprenticeships scale, but it's also important to have apprentices that are willing to learn. So welcome, Megan, and we would love to hear from you.
So First question for you, Megan. What made you say yes? And first of all, just a little background on Megan. She's a student at the Friendship Technology Prep Academy here in DC. She's an apprentice at New America. And she is the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship in the program of the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, PAYA. And so Megan, super achiever here, worked previously at the District of Columbia Housing Authority, as well as Ward 7 and 8 Prevention Center. So this is not the first gig, is that right?
Yeah.
So again, back to the question, what made you say yes as an to become an apprentice?
I don't know. It was kind of a competition to get into my apprenticeship. It was only one open position. I was like, I gotta have it. So I was like, but I said yes because they were the first to offer me a job back. It was either Amazon or Department of Labor, and New America responded back first. So I said, I'll go with you guys. And they started earlier too. So I kind of got a head start in the summertime.
That's amazing. That's what we like to hear. There's competition, right, for the
Yeah.
jobs. Walk us through a typical day. I mean, what does that look like for you? What does being an apprentice look like?
Okay, I can do today. I had school today. I go from like 8 to 12, sometimes 8 to 11. If I can leave, they let me leave. And then I commute from school to my work. It takes about 30 minutes. Then I get to work. I usually get there around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then I work from 1 to 5. Sometimes I'll have like a meeting or two, check-ins with my supervisor, Erica. And I'll just, do my work that they give me. It's nothing too crazy, and it's nice.
That's great. What surprised you the most? Like, did you anticipate that the work was going to be like this, or how is it different?
What surprised me the most, I don't know. Like, I like it. I don't really think anything is that bad. Like, I don't have no bad experiences with my job, and I feel like that's a good thing because I know some of my friends, they're not as satisfied, and I'm just like, guys, I want better for you guys. But I know a lot of them that really have like learned a lot from their own apprenticeships, because I know in my school there's 7 other apprentices at my school, so I know they've learned a lot from their apprenticeships. But I think what surprised me the most was just what I'm able to do now. I feel more adult, I guess. Yeah.
And has it changed your outlook? Are you thinking differently about maybe your own future, the jobs that you might be interested in?
Yes, it definitely changed my outlook. It made me want to pursue political science in college. I know signing day is tomorrow. I'll tell you guys tomorrow. But at first, I came in, I was like, I'm going to do marine biology. I'm going to get this apprenticeship. I'm going to just do it for 2 years, and I'm going to go to school somewhere random. But it definitely has made me change what I want to do, like in college, but also as like a career. So, yeah.
Well, those of us poli-sci majors, we're rooting for you.
Thank you.
Take that route. There's life after poli-sci school. So, what would you say to another? I mean, you're obviously in school. Not every one of your classmates is an apprentice, I assume. Yeah. But there are quite a few in your class, right? That's kind of remarkable to me. But I heard that there is quite a few. What would you say to another high school student who's not an apprentice right now, as why this might be a good thing for them?
Oh, I always tell them to get it. I always say, no, they're open now. Like, you guys should apply right now, because there's a lot new ones. There's ones that, I mean, honestly, when I first went in, I was like, I didn't really know what I was going to do with business operations. I was like, this is not what I want to do. There was no marine biology one, so I was like, I got to take one. So I always tell my friends, like, don't waste the chance to take an apprenticeship, especially because there's such a good benefits from it, and it definitely like teaches you a lot about yourself and what you can do like after high school. Because I know some people who have apprenticeships, they're not all decided on what they want to do, whether it's college or anything after high school. So I feel like it's definitely a good thing for them to do and pursue.
It's fantastic. You mentioned there were other students at your school doing other apprenticeships. So there's a real market for this. There's competition in getting the preferred ones.
Yes, it was competition. I remember very vividly. Like, it was junior year. It was 40 of us all sitting down. We all made our videos to interview for Amazon, and we all literally got responses back from Amazon in the exact same week. But right when I got my response back from New America, I said yes, and then Amazon was like, "Oh, we want to interview you," and I was like, "No." So I let my classmates have that.
That's fantastic. I think we also have questions from the audience, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get them. We're at that point, right? Is that fair to say? Are we timing-wise at the right moment? Do people need instructions on how to submit questions still? Or the QR codes, you all know? You've been trained well from previous sessions. And then I think that goes for the audience online as well. And we're panel 2, right? Is that right? Okay. Oh, this is a good one. What does apprenticeable occupation actually means? Is it just that the ladder structure is possible within the occupation, or does it account for employer will and capacity to actually do the mentorship and OJT pieces of the work? So that's a good question, right? Anyone want to take it? So I would say, obviously, the way I've mentioned it was a methodology to look at the skill set and say it is of sufficient complexity in order to merit the kind of investment that an apprenticeship entails. So if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, you want to have a job that is sufficiently complex that it takes that long to train the person for that, for the distance. We often hear from tech employers that, you can do, we can't go further than 6 months, or some say 3 months. And, yeah, you can train somebody in 3 months or 6 months, but, it's not quite necessarily that length that actually that employee is being trained in the workplace. That training goes on. So there's a metric that Joe Fuller developed to figure out what those jobs are. At JFF, we have this North Star of quality jobs. And quality jobs has a lot of dimensions, including sort of the work environment and how you value as an employee. But it also has this sense, and I would say, again, at the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, we think of it as, if it's a quality job, the odds are that it requires this, again, a skill level that an apprenticeship makes it appropriate for, because it's not a job that you can just go down, start the next day, and you have all the skills that you need to succeed. So I think there's a metric that I would refer you to Joe Fuller for how his methodology, and we're happy to share the paper. And then there is the sort of almost common sense way of looking at it, of like, is it complex enough? I don't know, Annalise, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, if from a layperson's point of view, I think it would be something that you want somebody who hasn't just studied something in a book to do that job. You want somebody who's actually tried it in practice and who has worked under the close supervision of a mentor in a structured way over a period of time before you let them run in that field. So it requires some level of hands-on learning experience, right? You don't want your doctor or your surgeon to go and operate on you without actually trying to operate, right? So like that would be, things in healthcare are actually very conducive to this, I would say. Engineering has, similar practicum focus, but I think we could expand that in technology. You wouldn't want a cybersecurity person who's just read about cybersecurity in a book. You want somebody who's actually had some experience. And so in terms of thinking about which roles to plug people into, another way to think about it, like if I think about Brookings, I think about roles where, like graphics design, where it requires some level of professional training, but maybe we see a lot of turnover there because we end up, if we recruit only college grads, they might move in from out of town, and then it's hard to justify staying that too long. But if you cultivated homegrown talent and you worked with them with mentors and you got them even a graphics design degree as part of the apprenticeship, that person might be more likely to stay. And so there could be a reason where you have a position where you have trouble with retention because you're recruiting from out of town and you really want to cultivate folks from your local high school And that might make more sense, so, yeah.
And I would say the one addition I'd make in terms of the will, the employer will and capacity to train, that obviously is related to the question that Annalise touched on before, which is you have to have an employer who's willing to do that. And of course, the payoff is significant in terms of having somebody who's attached to your labor force for a period of time, and the attachment is better than. But I would also say that that is what we have to build, right? We have to build the kind of the demand in a way, as the previous panel mentioned. You know, we have to have employers realize what that payoff is. Again, there's a little bit of extrapolation that has to go on in order for that to scale. I have a question for Megan from the audience. How important is it to get some money from out of this? Is that a good thing?
You know, as a senior, you know, those senior dues were $475, so I said, yeah, I need to be at work. I definitely tell my counselors every day. They're like, "Can you stay after school?" No, I actually like going to work. So, but you know, the money is important, guys. The money's important too.
It's not insignificant. And one other one. What are the skills? You already mentioned some, but what skills have you learned?
Project management. I've learned a lot about skills. I guess time management, reimbursements, like working with certain Google workspaces. Like I know I had to do training for Google Sheets, Google Drive, every Google platform, and that actually did help me, you know, outside of work too, because there were a few things that I didn't know. I've learned a lot about financial stuff, like Amex, Concourse, Airtable. Yeah, how to organize things, taking notes, manage things. Really a lot of different skills. I don't know, not really off the top of my head, but a lot of different things.
Well, a lot of things I don't know, so you already beat me. New America sounds like a cool workplace. You're getting all the good questions here, Megan, so here's another one. Any advice to a current or future supervisor of an apprentice about working with and leading a young person like yourself? What kind of supervisor do you like?
I like my supervisor, Erica. I like Taylor
that was
too.
A nice plug.
I know. I like Taylor too. I know she's not here right now, but I like all my supervisors, I like all my colleagues. But I would say one thing is just kind of have just some patience, because a lot of us come in with literally no idea what to expect, or no idea what we'll be able to do in the next 3, 6, 9 months. I know I did not expect I'd be doing all the things that I do now. And also a supervisor that's just, curious about their apprentice, trying to get to know them better so that you know a little bit more about what to expect from them and what they're looking forward to and what they hope to learn from you.
That's amazing. So all those supervisors out there, you heard it here. An RI question. Is there any data that shows the related instruction in registered apprenticeship is less expensive for an employer than the employer could find otherwise?
Not that I've seen.
So that might be a research project right there.
Yeah. Also, related instruction. I was talking before about if you had, last question. If you had a training provider that could do the first year of general training, how that could reduce the cost on the firm. Not generally speaking, if you could use, funding sources to pay for related instruction from, the community college or from higher ed, then that cost wouldn't be, would be deferred even more. And some states do have some formula funding for the related instruction. And so it partly depends on policy, right? If you could use financial aid for apprenticeship, as it says in the executive order, then, that could defer some of the costs on the employer and on the apprentice. So I think a lot of those costs are shaped by policy.
Okay, that wasn't the last question. The last question is coming. As apprenticeship continues to grow, how will data infrastructure and interoperability impact its expansion? So this is your favorite topic right there. That's an easy one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have a lot of distance to go before we have, modern interoperable data. And I hope that over time we really see some progress on this front, because it's really hard to know. It's hard to know what is the ROI without any consistent data. And when you think about how you're gathering the data, oftentimes we go to firms and we have them fill out survey after survey after survey, and it's adding more burden. So one change that I would like to see in interoperable data is let's modernize how we collect wage records. Let's have it semi-automated from payroll and have it standardized across states. So if we could get better employment data generally, that would not only benefit apprenticeship, because you could track earnings for someone, whether they're in an apprenticeship, whether they're in school, whether they're working, what are their earnings, and you would have it more frequently, more consistently, and with better quality, hopefully, than having an employer entering it by hand. But also, if you have shared definitions, I think across programs, across states, across agencies, then you can make the data link more easily. So I think, long term, it would be great if we had data infrastructure where, if I have a learning record and I have an app on my phone that has all my employment, education, apprenticeship, credentials, badges, all of that's tied to my identity, my digital identity, then when I apply for a job, I can say, I want you to show this verified record that I worked here at this range, to this employer or to this grad school or whatever it is. And I can control what I submit, and I'm not just sort of trying to go to ChatGPT and say, write a resume and write a cover letter and include these things, and then the employer hopes that that's actually true. But in fact, we have data that really can, in a modern way, follow the person and not follow the program and the compliance, right? Which is kind of how our data infrastructure is now. That's a long answer.
Well, it's a good answer, but I'm afraid this is all we have time for, because we are between you and a break. You're going to get a 10-minute break, is my understanding. Thank you so much, Annalise and Megan, for being here. Thank you. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. We're going to talk, or the next panel is going to talk about growing from company to industry. It's a pretty good panel. So stick around.
Is it on? Okay, thank you. I can't hear it from here. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I want to thank you all for being here. I didn't hear whether we had already had the introduction of the panelists, or was that, did that happen? Okay, all right, wonderful. Okay, so my name's Brent Orrell, and I'm a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where I lead our vocation, career, and work team. Of course, skills training is among those things, and apprenticeship is prominently part of our thinking and work. So I'm glad to be here, to be able to, and honored to moderate a panel like this, people that are so knowledgeable around this work. I'm just going to quickly give you their titles. You can look up their bios. Daniel Sirota, Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at Aon. Did I say that correctly?
Yep,
Aon.
absolutely. Thank you.
And is it A, small o, big N, or just?
A capital O N small.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
No,
great.
You're good. You're good.
All right, all right. We're also, this remarkable thing, we have this convergence of Brents here this afternoon, which is,
We are at quota.
we are, yeah,
For
no,
Brents.
we have promised not to ever do this again because nobody can take that much Brent. Anyway, Brent Parton, President of CareerWise. We also discovered that we had the same job at the Department of Labor, so in different administrations. So, okay, and Ashley Fitch, who is Director of the Charitable and Educational Organization of the United Steelworkers International Union.
And my middle name's Brent.
No kidding.
There we go. But I didn't work at DOL. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, with that, let's get into this. We want to, this panel is focusing on growing apprenticeship from companies into industry, so let's start talking about scaling. I think that's a good place to go at the beginning. Scaling apprenticeships, growing, and very good point. I love whoever wrote these questions. Growing the supply and the demand of registered apprenticeship. So what's your, anybody can lead off on this who wants to, what's your impression of the level of interest of apprenticeship among prospective apprentices? Like, I'm really curious about this because what I find is that skilled trades, I know that apprenticeship is broader than that, but in skilled trades, it is kind of hard to attract people to it. But I want to hear what you all think about that.
Well, I mean, I'll start off. And as I'm with the Steelworkers Charitable and Education Organization, which services the United Steelworkers International Union. So we're the largest manufacturing union in North America, which, right, as we're all here talking about the expansion of apprenticeship programs, I just, want to speak to like the manufacturing sector and specifically getting people interested in joining manufacturing first. I feel like that's our first challenge, right? Here are, there was a generation of workers that were expected to go into more white-collar jobs, get 4-year degrees, and I feel like over the past, couple of years, many people in this room and others have worked to try to push people into different career options, which I feel that we've seen, a bigger push towards. So one, getting them manufacturing, getting them interested in those sectors. Let's overcome that barrier first, which I think that we've done a good job, and then getting them into the apprenticeship programs. And I have to comment, just based on some of the prior panels talking about youth and getting them engaged. And one, thing that we've seen that has been successful, or I'm very proud of, is that K-12 work. And it's not putting them in apprenticeship programs. It's introducing precision measurements to a second grader, or what tools are. I mean, the best video I've seen was the second grader was like, my favorite day is when I got to use a hammer. Like, it was great. So I feel like taking steps like that helps. I can't say we're 100% there, but I could say that those moments and opportunities are things that we can work on to help push people into those sectors, and then inevitably correlate that back into more apprentices.
So I just want to ask one quick follow-up on this. What changes from the elementary school child who's excited about a hammer to a high school junior or senior who is running the other way when you try to talk to them about jobs in manufacturing or in, a registered apprenticeship? So what do you think?
I mean, I would come back with, I think it's the introduction to that. So was the high school student ever introduced to those as options, or has it always been, a non-hands-on, non-technical type of curriculum that was taught because maybe they didn't get that early exposure, which didn't lead them to make that career choice to begin with?
Yeah. And, do you want to weigh in, Brent?
So career-wise, we're a national nonprofit focused on connecting high school students to apprenticeship programs. And I think to that question, I think part of it is, it's not necessarily anything to do with the student or the parent, it's what the high school experience is structured to be. And again, it doesn't mean putting freshmen in apprenticeship programs, but I think we do have to take a serious look at how we spend our time in our high schools. I think bringing more of that industry exposure in certainly matters. I sincerely believe that we do need much more structured paths to apprenticeship within high schools. I think that, when we think about, and for example, in our work in New York City with New York City Public Schools, in 10th grade, we have a course that we are implementing just to build broad-based career readiness. Starting 10th to 11th grade, we're doing something called pathways matching to get exposure to different types of pathways that exist. And then really thinking about how you embed the apprenticeship application and preparation process into the final years of high school is critically important, because I sincerely believe that we still have a lot more people that want apprenticeships than slots. I think that's a reality that we have to appreciate. But if there's not a clear, structured path to get there, we're still asking young people in this country to wait a long time before they find apprenticeship. Again, the average age of an apprentice is still closer to 30 than it is 20. And I don't think we have to do that. I think we can build much more structured preparation, apprenticeship readiness, and exposure in those early years, whether you start the apprenticeship or not, junior year or senior of high school, depends on the occupation. That matters. It matters for how you spend your school day. It matters for the ritual of what high school is. It matters for how you normalize it as an option for students and parents.
Anything to add to those observations, Dan?
No, I think it was pretty much covered. I think coming from an employer lens, the more ways of getting schools ready, the better, right, to being able to transition them in. From an Aon perspective, we pick them up at the beginning of their associate's degree, and then they go through the 2-year program, and at the end of the 2 years, they get a full-time job at Aon, right? So from our standpoint, the more readiness, preparation at the high school level, the better. And the more ways that employers can partner with the local high schools to start thinking about work-based learning and other types of models to then help them transition is only going to make it more scalable and more easy for employers to then pick up that workforce and utilize them for the future.
So talk a little bit about readiness, because that can mean a lot of different things depending on the context. But what does it mean to be ready?
I think from our standpoint, there's a workforce readiness in the world of the Aon's corporate world of how to dress, how to show up, how to being able to get ready to go for a corporate office job. There's many different ways of looking at it from a manufacturing side and others, but some of the things that we really focus on is those basic skills. How do you write an email? How do you communicate? How do you are able to give speeches or talk about positions or think bigger? And the more ways of that being plugged into some of the high schools, the better.
Yeah, that completely resonates with everything that I've thought and read and researched over the years, is that across the economy, it's not just apprenticeships or manufacturing or skilled trades or whatever, but it's that readiness question doesn't have really anything to do with a specific job. It just has to do with, are you ready to be a worker?
I'll just say, to pick up on your hammer, and it sounds much better in the actual German than I'll say it, but they talk about, you have to work on readiness from the concept of what is a hammer, how do you use a hammer, eventually what you can build with a hammer. And I think that is this kind of phased concept that it's not about a particular industry or occupation in terms of readiness at the beginning. It really is a much broader base foundation.
And I think we see this in the FAME project, the advanced manufacturing projects. You know, they really start pretty young, middle school, introducing kids to actually being in the factories. But also, they spend about 25% of their time on these readiness issues.
Yeah.
You know, that's quite a bit of time to devote to it, and I think it's indicative of just how significant the challenge is. Dan, did you have anything else you wanted to say about the employer perspective on this?
Look, just starting from the beginning, and love seeing John Ladd in the room from when I kind of first began the apprenticeship journey in 2016 at Aon. We had 3 employers as kind of collaborators. What I built in Chicago is called the Chicago Apprentice Network, an employer-driven initiative focused on bringing employers together, taking best practices, and expanding and growing apprenticeships, right? Hearing it from the employer mouth. What started off as 3 is now 110 across Chicago, right? So more employers communicating, more industries working together to start solving the problems that they face, which from an Aon perspective was we were losing people that were coming from that 4-year degree. They were leaving after 6 months. That's a job loss, right? That manager would then have to go and recruit. If we're able to invest our time and partner with the local community colleges, and other employers saw that, they see the ROI of long-term investment because they're keeping that person within the firm. And then there's loyalty. And then they see an upward growth in a career path. I think more and more employers are thinking differently in and around the phase of what a worker looks like within their companies. What used to be just, you go to the top schools and pick them up and they come in and they take those jobs, that's gone, right? There's more collaborations with community colleges. There's more collaborations with those intermediaries that play a role to help with some of those skills, readiness to being able to bring them in. And employers are just thinking differently about how they're hiring. From an Aon perspective, we removed the 4-year degree requirement, right, in our entry-level jobs. That's out of the way because that requirement doesn't fit the needs of the workers we're looking for within our workforce. And that tie is part of the apprenticeship movement that we're trying to do across the country. And we have 9 networks to date that are continuing to educate and push those forward.
Brent, did you want to add anything to this from the employer perspective?
I mean, just to this point, just to double click on what Dan said, because this panel is about scale. I think there's a lot of talk, and there has been for some time, around we just need more employer champions. And yes, we absolutely need more employer champions, particularly large, name brand companies. But the question is, what do you do with those champions? And I think what Daniel underscored about how in Chicago, you guys went on this journey with how you mentioned two other companies at the beginning, and now you've been on the journey with 100. You're not asking your partners at City College of Chicago to reinvent the wheel for each one of you in terms of your apprenticeship pathway. It's still industry and employer specific, and that's the beauty of an apprenticeship. Once they get into your company, it recognizes there's going to be some specifics. But at the end of the day, it is a sector-wide approach. You're working with multiple employers at once. And so places like Chicago that have built that foundation in the non-traditional space, I think is an homage in many respects to where our joint labor partners and others have been operating on an industry sector-wide basis for some time.
Well, that's a very smooth handoff to Ashley.
Try.
Let's talk about
Welcome, Brent.
To Ashley Brent, I should say. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too.
Well, it's kind of going back from the employer perspective and scaling. So, in line that one on the employer perspective section, we look at manufacturing across this country and it looks a lot different. So I come from an aluminum facility. I was a CNC machinist. And when my grandfather worked at the facility, there was 1,000 people. When I worked there, there's 200. right? We all know the production and what we needed to do to remain competitive in the global market, but the reality is our manufacturing facilities are smaller. So when you go to, I'll just use most recent example, our chemical sector, our average chemical facility size is 30 people, very small employers that feed larger facilities, and they struggle getting into apprenticeship programs for various reasons, right? Labor, costs, their administrative, all of the above. So I'd have to echo in on the group sponsors and intermediaries helping to curb that, but I still think there's a lot of work there to do for our smaller employers to make it, it's not that they don't have training programs, it's just, joining in and really looking at the registered apprenticeship model. The second thing that came to me throughout this discussion was really, involving workers in these discussions. Every time I sit down and we talk about expanding apprenticeship models, I say, well, I tried to call the employer, it didn't get back, it's kind of stalled out, I'm still working on it. But if you talk to our members, they are struggling. They know what needs to be done. They know the help that needs. And if they know that there's a solution out there that can help, they will push for the employer to do the right thing because they know it's the right thing for not only our members' safety, but to help make sure that the company is productive so those jobs stays in those communities for a long period of time. So I would just have to add in that when it comes to scaling, get labor in on those conversations. If it's a union representative facility, I know the Working for America Institute's here, they can help you find the right people. But get those folks at the table because I think that's really going to push the needle.
Okay, so I want to ventilate just a little bit on one of my concerns, which is I spend a lot of my time these days thinking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect the future of work. I had kind of hopes that maybe the manufacturing sector would be spared this time in terms of the next round of automation. I don't think that's actually going to be the case. I'm very interested in hearing what all of you think about this, because I'm always interested in hearing from whoever I'm talking to what they think about AI. But one of my principal concerns about providing direction toward credentials, whether it's an apprenticeship or some even narrower kind of form of credentials, is that this is very unpredictable territory in terms of what's going to happen with AI. We talk about, there's certain things that AI will never be able to do. You can take that away, add yet to that sentence. These are things that AI can't do yet. I was just reading yesterday about the use of these evidently quite large drones that are being used in construction sites to lift materials, to actually do work on buildings. I had never heard of such a thing before, and I would have probably bet that it couldn't happen, but there it is. So how do you guys think about this? We want people to be able to attach to the workforce. That's why they need credentials. If they're not going to go to 4-year, and they take a different pathway, they're going to need a credential of some sort. But we also know that in this era, these credentials can be quite brittle. So in terms of the impact of automation within the economy, how do you guys think about that? What's the answer? Because I would hate to see a bunch of people go full bore on apprenticeship or into apprenticeship programs and then find out that the jobs aren't there at the other end because the technology has moved on. Mm-hmm. Who wants to take that one?
I'll buy you both some time. But no, I'll say what I want to what I should talk to about is how even we're seeing with a lot of our employer partners, we're not creating new apprenticeships built on AI. And with all due respect to the administration and the EO, that's like, we need a bunch of generative AI apprenticeships. I'm not sure that's the right way to think about it. I do think we are seeing with some of our partners in New York City and Accenture, some of our partners in Denver, Colorado, and Pinnacle Assurance, they are building the use of AI into their existing occupation profiles because that's new technologies being deployed on the job. So I should dig a lot into that and talk about that, but I actually think what it holds up is a much deeper reality about what apprenticeship should be and is versus, say, short-term credentials. And it goes back to, if you've been to Europe or these other countries, you always do these like tours, and inevitably someone puts a piece of steel in your hand, like this fabricated coil. And it's something that these apprentices, 15, 16 have made. And they're doing it in this place when literally down the hall, there's a machine that does it, but they're milling it by hand first. In their apprenticeship, and they're first milling and fabricating these designs by hand. Yet we can press a button and do it right now with a CNC machine. And the question people always ask is, why are you, as an apprentice, learning to do this when technology can do that? And one of the most powerful answers that I've ever heard was one of the apprentices, 16 years old, said to a leader, not to be named from a state, because I want to build the next machine. And it gets this idea of apprenticeship is 2,000 years old, where a lot of technology has changed in that period. But what it underscores is that apprenticeship is not just about building a widget or one skill. It's really about craft and an occupation. And that's not something I think that's limited to being a carpenter. The idea of understanding the theory and the underpinning of what it means to fabricate and build something is about a base of knowledge that you bring into an industry, that you bring into a process that is a foundation for not just keeping you engaged in learning math and how you learn in an applied way, but for really truly understanding what it means to have pride and dignity in that profession. That is a much more durable understanding and a much more durable set of skills than I think we often think of apprenticeship in the same context as a 6-month credential, when it is very much not that. Because technologies and widgets will always change. Apprenticeship is about, I think, truly marrying theory and practice in a foundational way that can be adaptive over time.
Other thoughts? I'm collecting all of this mentally, at least.
I'll just add that from an AI perspective, we're starting to see more employers getting engaged with local community colleges on curriculum development in this sector. So as new technology comes out, as new ways of thinking starts happening, employers are further embedding their technology to help train what the future workforce might look like. I also use, you bring up that example. I also use the example of, the internet. Everyone thought when the internet was going to come out, Y2K, all the jobs were going to be in trouble. That wasn't the case, right? So I think we're also at this directional point where AI, and as regulation comes out around AI in the United States and more broadly and what that looks like, that will help direct kind of the future of where that can go. And I do believe that apprenticeship is still one of those models that employers are going to be looking for long-term to train and have trainable individuals to then elevate and grow into these new emerging technology and new emerging jobs.
I mean, one of the things I always think about apprenticeship, I wrote a piece for the Niskanen Center not too long ago about this, but it serves multiple functions, right? Apprenticeship programs, obviously, skill development is right at the heart of it, but it's also about this, giving people a connection to other people in order to learn those durable skills that we were talking about earlier, and to see those modeled, because a lot of our trouble right now is that people don't have enough models of what it means to be an effective, or have effective interpersonal skills. It has been a surprise to me, I don't know if any of you have encountered this, but it's been a surprise to me to see how good AI is at coaching people in work and education. It's like the kindest grade school teacher you ever had, except that they never got tired or frustrated or sick of answering the same question over and over again. So I'm curious, has that been part of the discussion of like, how do we integrate AI into apprenticeship as a supplement to training? So has anybody encountered that yet?
Well, I mean, I could say, every time we start talking about technology, I always want to say that, we as a union believe that right? Workers need to remain at the center of these conversations. Worker augmentation, assisting workers. I've seen plenty of examples of where technology was integrated and made the job safer. We've also seen plenty of examples of where that wasn't the case, right? But two, that technology is needed so we remain competitive in this global economy that I mentioned earlier. So, with that and thinking about technology, I go back to United Steelworkers. The way we made steel 200 years ago is not the way we make steel today, and it's not going to be the same way we make steel 200 years from now. And our training throughout this whole process has been adapted. And in every single sector, I think you can see that. I feel like generative AI had like a huge jump, came out real fast, but then, the other AI technology, it's been a creep, and it's been in almost every sector for a very long time. When we sit back and look about it, I mean, it creeped up on us. How many of us have a cell phone with us, right? Now it's attached to us. So I also think that in the apprenticeship programs, whether it's, the RTI or OJT, all of those, that it has integrated itself into it, but it has been natural because, again, when you sit down and look at what needs to be done, or you look at updating your standards, that you adapt it with the way that things are done. So it's creeped in there. And this is all, again, keeping generative AI separate from that conversation. And then as far as like the AI skills, apprenticeships, the state of Pennsylvania deregistered 28 programs last year, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That was people combining, that was occupations that have left the state that are becoming inactive. It's like we don't need any ferryman apprentices.
We don't?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But so I think there's going to be a natural, as we look at the economy and look at sectors as they fluctuate, that there will be new ones. And how long they last, we don't know. But I think to someone, to the point that we all agree with, that there's proven points of how effective it is with training people in sectors, and that should be a reason to do it, not to do it.
And the only thing I'll say just on the AI point too is we have something called the Apprenticeship Hub. CareerWise, our employer partners and our school partners use it to communicate and implement apprenticeships like a lot of intermediaries use. We are looking at AI not so much for training for apprentices, but we're embedding it to train the trainers. It is a lot of work to be a supervisor or a trainer for an apprentice, and just putting yourself in that seat. If you got your job you're trying to do, you're trying to mentor and support this other person, how much time do you have in a day to think about what's the right sort of things that, particularly in some fields, like how do I assign them the right thing that's going to help demonstrate that competency? And so I think some of the best uses of AI is a first draft. At least most people using for their homework should realize that. And so the idea of like a first draft thing that you can come to your apprentices, be like, hey, I'm trying to get to this competency. What are some examples of things that I can kind of use as a learning tool? So training the trainer more rather than training the apprentice.
Anything else?
No, I think
Yeah.
good cover.
I had something I wanted to say. I forgot. Okay, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the president's executive order. What's it going to take? Those are very ambitious goals. We need ambitious goals, right? We need to be encouraged to think big. But what's it going to take to fulfill?
I think definitely employer collaboration. Really working together, taking industry best practices, and employers coming together and collaborating. I think the registered apprenticeship goal is definitely big, but I definitely think the more ways we can highlight those programs, think about it as an opportunity to really elevate things that are working and opportunities of growth and digging in. And I wear another hat of chair of Apprenticeship Illinois for the state. One of our biggest priorities is continuing to educate employers on what it means to have an apprenticeship. Getting apprentices to be out there talking about how these programs have changed their lives, but also changed it as an opportunity to showcase for an employer that they could have this individual work in their company. somebody that could have been working at a fast food restaurant or a retailer or, somewhere where it wasn't that career aspiration pathway, and utilizing apprenticeship models as an elevation, we have found that really highlighting the apprentice and their journey really helps bring employers across along, and I think there's a great opportunity to do that in this administration.
So Ashley, we were talking about this before we came out here. It's like, I know it's apprenticeship month or week or day, whatever
I don't know if I love NAD. I don't know if that fits. Nod.
And that means there are a lot of people very excited running around, and now we've got the EO out there at the same time. What do you think about how do we take best advantage of the energy around the issue right now?
So I've had a lot of thoughts and ideas.
Because you're going up to Hershey. When you leave here, you're
Yeah.
going to Hershey to another apprenticeship meeting. So.
Yeah. So one thing that I did want to comment that I don't think has really been highlighted is transitional workers. So we've talked a lot about getting new workers, young workers into the program, and in the state of California, there has been a goal that they will transition to only EV vehicles sold in 2035. And we have a large amount of workers that are in the oil sector, which have to find transitioning employment in that state. So we've had a lot of conversations about apprenticeships, young apprenticeships. Well, there's a whole workforce, and oil is just one example as we continue to look. So how are we going to build upon the skills of an already trained workforce and draw them into the apprenticeships? Because I think that there is a highly trained, skilled workforce that can easily be retrained and retooled to help meet some of the labor demands. So one, I think that can help scale if we really do targeted, unified approach with the rapid response groups and state boards. And then secondly, Keystone Development Partnership Intermediary for the Working for America Institute has a apprenticeship navigator program. So, right, you're training a cadre of apprenticeship officers to help better spread the word and train them. So I think by taking on more statewide initiatives like that program in Pennsylvania would really help expand or help have better reach to these small employers. And looking at, Maryland was in here. Our union has a long history and a continued history with Sparrows Point to our, transitioning sectors in Virginia, that there's a really broad opportunity to help have those conversations at local levels with workers, with employers together that would help drive those numbers.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think given the demographic challenges that we're facing, it's not like we can just reach into the labor market and start pulling people in. I mean, it's challenging right now to get, students on pathways and or, people who are emerging from education. We just don't have enough people, right? That's I think our biggest long-term problem is that our worker population isn't keeping up with economic growth in terms of the number of jobs that are being created. So we've got to figure out how to extend people's working lives. And I think that this is a very interesting approach.
Technology and AI kind of all come in.
Yeah, and figuring out how to use it as a reskilling technology is super important, because we're going to have an awful lot of people, I think, who are going to need to make a transition. And it'd be great to see some of those folks make that switch into a registered apprenticeship program. Do you want to say something, Brent?
I agree with industry collaboration. I agree with how you align to incentives. I will say the EO itself did a big favor, which is just clarified up front. We're going to focus on one system of apprenticeship as opposed to debate what apprenticeship should be for the next 4 years. So that helps. Clarity helps. I mean, the thing I'll call out too is the EO centered apprenticeship in a broader workforce discussion. And so it talks about alignment between apprenticeship with other federal workforce investments and programs. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the driving a stronger connection between registered apprenticeship and CTE. It talked about a lot of other federally funded workforce programs. To your point, like how you're, that's a huge scaffold for how you reach into communities and pull people in the labor market, get them supportive services and things they need. The reality is, though, you're gonna have to invest in those systems to leverage them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we are getting to closer to the end now, and I wanted to make sure we left some time for questions from the audience. We do have a number of questions. One of these that I'm particularly interested in, I get to be selfish and pick the one that I am especially interested in. And it relates to the, we're dropping the 4-year degree requirement for so many jobs. And that, at least it's being advertised that way. And the risk that our questioner is pointing out is, how do we message this so that these jobs, just because they don't require degrees, are not skilled jobs? Like there's I think this grows out of the old, like understanding of like what skilled trades were, and that was the thing that you did if you couldn't go to college. That's the way it was marketed. It's like, oh, we're going to send you over to the shop classes, and maybe you'll find something there because you're not college material. That, not explicit, but that was sort of the message. So how do we, any thoughts on sort of switching that narrative up? That's a cultural challenge. Dan, did you want to?
Look at what they did.
I mean, we did it as a way to provide opportunity, right? So you got individuals in the south side of Chicago, tell you the truth, they can't afford to go to a $150K school, and they'd be on student loans for God knows how long. This gives them a pathway in. This gives them an opportunity to where they never, if we didn't switch this up, there would have been a highly likely not happen an opportunity for us to ever hire someone from city colleges. We never did. And it really changed the way that we thought about our workforce. We had a problem. We're in the risk business. That's what we do. We try to solve this problem. And part of the problem solving we found is, why not hire these individuals that are a block away from our office, right? And find a way to create a model that at the end of their apprenticeship program, they're off and running, right? They're moving. Day one, they're not gonna know, when they come in at the beginning of the apprenticeship program, they know nothing about Aon insurance. I still don't know everything about Aon, like more broadly, right? It's one of those things that they learn it, they breathe it, and then at the end of the 2 years, they have more knowledge than individuals from the 4-year because they've been here, they've networked, they've met people, they've met with clients, they're getting engaged, and that sets them up for a trajectory to be able to move forward and have a long-standing career. We have apprentices that are now managing apprentices. We have apprentices that are deciding that, I want additional schooling. I want to get, more embedded into actuarial. I don't know why, but I want to get more embedded into actuarial work. I want to get more embedded into different reinsurance, different fields. And that just creates opportunity. It's the way to set up. And the reason why we did it is we wanted to provide opportunity for students in Chicago. And the reason why we made the network was for hopefully other employers to follow suit, other employers to think differently around their workforce. We could do it all day long. Aon could have just been like, you know what? Aon's going to do it. Good for us. We'll take all the talent we can. Take it all from city colleges. No one else follows suit. But what we wanted to do was to make this the new normal, the new way of thinking.
So let me ask a follow-up here because, we've seen state governments, we've seen companies talking about removing this requirement. My understanding, I haven't looked at this closely, but my understanding is that still hasn't made, that does not result, removal of the requirement does not result immediately in a burst of hiring of people who don't have degrees into these organizations, whatever they are. What's been the experience at Aon? How many do you have at any one time?
So we bring in 25 a year in Chicago, in collaboration. We've expanded to 9 states, so depending on the state and the job availability based off it, it's about 10 maybe in certain offices. Some offices are smaller, some offices are bigger. And it kind of just depends on the need, right? It depends on what we're doing and the role that the business needs and requires and continues to grow. It's added into our workforce strategy more broadly, and that's part of a bigger, broader initiative we've done as a firm.
I mean, I do think that your point about, you know, I think that these kids that you're talking about who can't, you know, don't have a financial pathway to a 4-year degree, maybe they aren't interested in a 4-year degree, that's fine too. But pitching this as an opportunity for a head start in the workforce is really, really smart, I think. You know, get on this pathway now, you won't have the debt, and here's your earning potential over the next 10 years. I think that that is a really compelling
And from an
marketing.
Aon side, we give them a salary, they get benefits, the same thing as me, and we pay for their school.
Yeah.
Win, win, win.
That's, I think, the key is in this mental model where it's college or apprenticeship, I think still way too often people are assuming that apprenticeship is not integrated with college. That is completely the opposite in terms of how you work with city colleges. And even in a lot of the more traditional trades, they're building articulation agreements. So that mental model is not reflective of where the reality is. The other mental model is that college is a bunch of people throwing frisbees on a green field. Most college students are working learners.
Yeah.
Most college students are working while they're going to school at night. They're working low-wage jobs, maybe 2 or 3 of them, maybe driving in the gig economy, and trying to go to school and build a career in that field. So if we're really focused on success in working learners in this space, this idea that college is, you're missing on this pastoral, you know, enlightenment period, when most people are there to try to get a career anyway.
Yep.
It's about making sure that you're earning while you're learning in something that's relevant to the field, because you're also building the durable skills, you're building the social networks, you're building the mentorships. That I think is the mental model also that we need to confront in this place, to say that, well, this is a harsh choice. But I'll just credit Aon and Lott, who have said, for us, it's not just about skills-based hiring and tearing the paper ceiling. We're actually building a delivery system that's different to make that real. And I don't think we see enough of that yet, both on the public sector or private sector that's made those moves.
And I would add that I think, you know, on the vein of the high school and younger workers, that really having the conversation with the parents is what we've done.
Oh, yeah.
Because they too, you know, as much as we think kids don't listen to us, they do listen to their parents like half the time. So if their parents like, oh, you don't want to do an apprenticeship program, it's, you know, the 3 Ds, like it's not going to be good for you, then they're less inclined to go that pathway. So actually having those conversations, and I think to a point that starts with us, because how many times have we said, oh, those non-traditional occupational, you know, apprenticeable occupations? Well, I think we have to start saying just the apprenticeable occupations, not the non-traditional apprenticeable occupations.
Non-traditional second best.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting point. So that relates to this question of, you know, kids, not just kids, people do not make decisions like this in isolation. They're subject to all sorts of influences, people talking to them, telling them who they are and what they should do and how they should be. And I think that this is particularly true of young people, like, because they're still very much dependent on their families for basic things. And I remember reading this statistic that just blew my mind. 92% in the survey, 92% of parents said they wanted their kids to become engineers. And I'm like, 92%? I mean, I doubt if there's 10% of the population that would have A, the interest, and B, the ability, because engineering is like the hardest thing to undertake. But it's that all that does is speak to the parental anxieties about the economic future for their kids. And it's like, just become an engineer and then I won't have to think about this anymore, and you won't be in my basement for the next 10 years. So but that's not just families, that's guidance counselors, that's teachers, that's, do you sense an openness among our professional educators in particular, I think, to like really rethinking the way that they talk to kids about work? I'm just curious, have you encountered that?
I could just say from, my experience, all the way from, K-12 community colleges, that we've been able to have really good, healthy conversations that promote, bring you and your kid and, we're gonna do a tour, we're gonna do some robotics, and having these boot camps is what we call them, our manufacturing sector boot camps that we have across the country. And I feel that there's always been an open and willingness to do that, because I feel like a lot of at least for the United Steelworkers, for our union, since we're heavily tied to sectors that communities are built upon the workplaces that we're ingrained, so.
I mean, I do think that the environment has shifted so much around four-year degrees, like it's not, people now understand, they should have understood this 20 years ago, it is not a guarantee of a great financial or economic future for everybody. We're clearly sent too many kids to college, half of them aren't finishing. So, okay, well, join me in thanking the panel. This has been a great discussion. I so appreciate you traveled all the way from Pittsburgh to be with us. Thank you. I'm going to ask now that Deborah Kobus come up. Okay, yeah, we're going to get out of here.
We're excused.
She's going to come down. Come up.
Hi, I'm Deborah Kobus. I'm a senior fellow here at Urban and lead our apprenticeship work. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I know what you've all been waiting for is more housekeeping, so I'll jump straight to that, which is that we'll send out a follow-up email in the next couple days with a recording as well as a survey. We'd really appreciate your filling it out so we can continue to design events that are hopefully helpful for all of you. If you lost a key fob, it's at the front desk. And all speakers from today, please come up after we conclude so that we can take a group photo. That being said, I would just like to reflect on a couple of themes that we heard throughout today. It was such a rich afternoon. There's no way to capture everything and still get you to the jumbo shrimp, which I've been told to encourage you all to eat. But a few highlights really struck me. First, just from the very opening of this afternoon, thinking about apprenticeship not just as a tool, think about apprenticeship as a tool, not just as a program, and not just, as we heard at the end, as a credential either, but really keeping a focus on what are the goals of workers, of employers, of educational institutions, of our workforce system, our public agencies, our unions, and really use apprenticeship as a way to advance those goals. And also right up through to the end, really hearing about the need to be nimble and evolve, whether it's because of AI or other changes in our economy. We need to really be able to move with industry. And I will offer the added comment that apprenticeship is really built to do that in a way that many other training models are not, right? You can be nimble not just in the adjustments of designing the curriculum, but you're learning on the job. And so as a company is changing, your learning is changing in real time. And so we need the system to also be nimble and support that evolution. And some of the questions we heard discussed are really even more fundamental of how do we train? If you have AI that can do the rote tasks that a lot of us actually learned on, how do we make sure that that learning continues to happen? Because some tasks might be tedious and easy to replicate, but that's really when you get your first in-depth exposure to what a field looks like. And if we skip that step because it seems like a savings in the short term, we'll lose out on those really deeply knowledgeable leaders of the future. Another thing was really just the focus on ecosystem building. And we really need to figure out how to work together through data, through shared definitions, starting with youth well before they're even considering a registered apprenticeship program, and including workers as a part of who we're hearing from in what we need to design. I have to have the requisite funding note. So yes, you do need stable investments as a baseline for delivering a system and for innovating. But a lot of what we heard today actually wasn't just a call for funding. There were two really different types of needs that we heard. One was this cultural or narrative shift around the role of apprenticeship, and really making sure that employers and workers are thinking about the role and the value that apprenticeships can provide to everyone. The second was actually just the sort of nitty-gritty, detailed administrative and program delivery needs that we need to keep paying attention to in order to make it easier to deliver impactful apprenticeship programs. And I particularly loved the apprenticeability question. This is like, only apprenticeship nerds will be with me on this, but like, it really captured both of those things, right? Conceptually, how do we think about which parts of our economy can be best served by apprenticeship, right? Like, that is a theoretical, fundamental question that we want to grapple with and that we're trying to continue to expand. The second is the technical side. Like, apprenticeability is also how we determine if you're on a list and can literally deliver a registered apprenticeship program, right? So what does that process look like? And do those two things, do our cultural shift and our technical administrative shifts, do they align right now? Is it straightforward? Is it transparent? And we're gonna have to address these two things in tandem in order to really grow the system. I think employers and states, we saw today, are figuring all of this out right now. And so our role is really to help elevate this. We're all in the room because we all have ambitious goals for apprenticeship. So our call to action for today is really to think about how we can support what the sponsors, what the apprentices, what the states are already doing, and help them continue to hear their needs on the ground and support their needs on the ground. So again, I know I'm between you and the jumbo shrimp, so I'll just conclude by saying it's exciting to see so many familiar faces in the room. There's so much expertise in this room that can help grow a successful apprenticeship system. But it's also even more exciting to see new faces in the room. That is what growth looks like, is to continue to expand our community just as we're expanding the communities all around the country that are focused on apprenticeship. So I hope everybody stays for the reception and has a chance to enjoy the familiar and new faces that are here for all of us. Thank you so much.